You had to be up at the right time to see the 10 snowflakes, though. Yeah, a little bit. Here. A little one. Yeah, really. It counts. It still counts. Snow candle. And it's just a nice holder, what it amounts to.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. 6 o'clock. Just for everybody's info to begin with, we have Frank Pinnabone on the phone for right now. I don't know if he's going to make it before the end of the meeting or not, but he is on the phone currently with us. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Joan, you have the roll recorded. So, with that, Mr. Ryder.
On academics tonight, Mr. Steckel. On K-6 Academic Committee update.
The K-6 Academic Committee update, as well as 7 through 12 Academic Committee update, we'll defer to later in the meeting. We have some presentations to make at that time. So we'll, if you don't mind, we'll just go through A and B and move right into C.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that what you need?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm not sure if you have this in front of you, and if you don't, please let me know. It's about our curriculum changes from our business and computer technology courses. I did send this to you, but you may not have printed out, so I did make copies just for your review. We're actually, you're welcome.
I'm good.
You're good? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Ange.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. We are,
I printed it out.
oh, you, very good. Good for you. We are actually looking at updating our computer science courses in our business and computer technology class department. I actually brought Mr. Tanzos with me and Mrs. Carmichael, and they brought 2 of their stellar students who take classes with them. And they can actually better tell you why they want to update their courses, and the students can give you an idea of what the need is out on a college level and why they feel so passionate about updating our computer science classes. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tanzos, and he's just going to go through this quickly with you to explain what classes will drop and what we'll be adding. But we are going to ask for your approval at the next board meeting if you feel this is appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Tanzos.
All right, we've been working extremely hard this year to improve and revamp the computer science curriculum over at the high school for a number of reasons. One of the biggest reasons is that computer science education has kind of declined over the years. And the reason is pretty simple. When applications came out, Microsoft Word and PowerPoint, and we've kind of transformed from a society where we focus on doing things like programming of Visual Basics and tinkering with computers to learning apps and how to use apps and how to navigate through OS 10 on the Mac and do all sorts of things with PowerPoint and Word. And but the programming has kind of gone by the wayside, and computer science has gone by the wayside. So one of the things that's happening in industry right now, though, is the jobs for computer science are exploding. In fact, the demand is so great that there will be 400,000 new positions available to computer science students by the year 2020 and each year after. Unfortunately, most of those are going to end up going on field. Actually, I'm sorry, 1.4 million computing jobs. So you can see that kind of on that first page there. So what we're doing here is we're trying to realign the curriculum, make some changes, and what I'd like to do is kind of go through some of the rationale behind the changes, because we put a lot of thought. We've gone through, Mrs. Carmichael ended up going through workshops over the summer, and we tried to get an idea of, are we on the right path? So one of the first things that was a transformative kind of change, or something that's going to end up causing us to make a change, is the Cisco Networking Academy. They, at one time, only offered a college-level curriculum. They actually ended up diverging and creating two versions, a high school level and a college level. We actually offered both. The high school level was designed to be something that was accessible to anybody. But what ended up happening is they merged the two back, and now they're back to only doing a college level. So for us, Intro to Networking, we want to eliminate that course. So we won't be offering it. We're going back to just the college level curriculum. So that'll still be retained, Honors Intro to Networking. The other one is a big deal. This is replacing Visual Basic. So we want to drop Visual Basic and add a new course called Honors Computer Science Principles. Now, Honors Computer Science Principles was actually created out of a need from universities to attract computer science students. That in turn was created out of a need by industry to attract computer science graduates. So what ended up happening was universities got together and they started working on a new AP course. Now, what we want to do is get ahead of the game here and transform, instead of doing Visual Basic, what Honors Computer Science Principles is designed to do is give students a fundamental understanding of what computer science is, give them a little bit of a taste of problem solving, programming, working with robotics, networking, web design. So it's designed to give students an understanding of computer science. It's an AP course also that can be taken as early as 9th grade, 10th grade. Now, that course is due out in 2016, 2017. We want to go and add it as an honors course for now, and then when the AP test comes around, we'll be able to go and transform and add that, make the Honors Computer Science AP Computer Science Principles. So our actual curriculum would end up being a combination of AP Computer Science Principles, we would have the Honors C# Programming, we'd have the AP Java as well as options, along with Honors Intro to Networking and Web Design. So one of the things that was kind of an affirmation that we're on the right track, we actually visited Lafayette University, Carol and I, and we were able to go and talk to the professor over there, and we just kind of had them talk to us for a while. What do you want to see in students? And what they actually ended up describing was exactly the same types of things that we would have in that computer science principles class that's actually being developed by universities throughout the country. So they're kind of all chipping in and helping build this curriculum. We've seen preliminary versions of it, and we're ready to go for next year if it gets added. We won't require any textbooks. We can actually go through all online resources, so it's not going to cost anything extra to add it. One of the exciting things about this, though, is not only did we see that this looked like it was on the right track, but we saw that their first undergraduate level, they're offering a game programming course. The idea behind game programming course, it's kind of like, kids are interested in games, but you can you sneak the learning in there. So if they're having fun, if they're highly motivated to do something, it's easier to kind of engage them and teach them whatever you want to teach them. So I know from our standpoint, we actually have a course that's similar, Honors C# Programming, where we do the same things. The professors took a lot of pride in showing us the projects that they had there, and I think I was pretty pleased to see that the projects that we have and that our students are doing are on par with them. So that's kind of an affirmation that we're on the right track in that regard with AP Computer Science. It makes a very, very strong offering for us. Right now, we've been doing kind of just to add a little bit of the other things that we've been doing this year. We started a computer science club. We actually have around 65 to 70 members who signed on to do the computer science club. We're looking to do a week of code in December to try to get the whole high school to be involved with doing a week of code. That's in celebration of Computer Science Week, Education Week, which is coming up. We're also going to be doing a little kids who code camp for elementary school kids, grades 1 through 4, to learn a little bit about computer science, to get them interested. I remember when I was in elementary school, I had a little turtle that I got to move around the screen, and that kind of fostered my interest, and we decided, we want to do the same thing for some of the elementary school students. In addition to that, we've had some students over the past weekend. They went off to a hackathon, which it's not actual hacking into computers. It's kids, our kids. There's actually a group of girls, because we're working very hard to involve girls and recruit girls into the curriculum, because there's a difference. It's primarily dominated by guys right now, and we're really trying hard right now to close that gap, to get more girls involved.
And it also
So.
will help with the shortage of the number of computer science majors that they increase the number of girls throughout the country.
So we had an all-girl group go off to Philadelphia and actually create 3 apps. They came over, they're like, Mr. Tanzers, Miss Carmichael. They showed us apps that they had developed over the course of a weekend. They started at noon. They had engineers from Dropbox, from GitHub, from a couple major companies, Apple, showing them, teaching them one-on-one how to develop these applications, and they stayed literally overnight. They said they slept for 3 hours. They worked all throughout the night, took a 3-hour nap, got back up, kept on working, and they said some groups didn't finish anything. Our girls finished 3 apps in one night, and there were some really cool things. So I wish I had them here to show it to you. But
Did you have any questions before for him or for myself, as far as what we're going to ask to discontinue and what we're adding?
The question I'd have, first of all, I just want to thank you for your enthusiasm and what you're all bringing, because it's just great. And I recall I think it was our conversation where you said you were going to put technology on the map at the high school or something, and I can see why you'd say that, because you're very excited about it, and I really appreciate that. But one question I'd have is, do we have a scope and sequence for the courses that we're going to propose?
For this one?
Yeah.
yes, we do actually. I don't have it here with me, but
But do you have one for both courses, scope and sequence, by any chance?
It's part of the AP, this AP and the pilot program.
The
College
AP
Board
would-
supplies a lot of
yeah,
that.
they would.
Yeah, the AP would have it. I guess what I'm wondering is the one that you're proposing. You do have that scope
The
and
honors.
sequence.
The honors computer
Yeah.
science
Yeah.
principles. Yes, we have we have the scope of sequence from what the pilot program actually is right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't. I don't have it here. I don't have. It
No, that's okay. But I'm just thinking that, if we really want the board to approve it, we should have the scope and sequence so that they get a sense of the
I can
breadth
have
of
them send that to me.
Yeah.
Because I know the board meeting is next
Tuesday.
Tuesday. And we are asking for next Tuesday because we need this to be in our course selection guide for the high school for November, so that students can have that printed and then start the process
Sure.
of course selections. That's why this is coming up so
Yeah,
quickly.
yeah.
So I'll make sure that that's on the board docs with
Yep.
Joan.
Yep,
Okay.
that's good.
And then the AP course is not new. That would be brought back. We actually haven't offered that, so that's not something we need to have approved, but I wanted you to know that we are bringing that course back and following the AP curriculum, and we can provide that, which also provides us with more school performance profile points with the AP points, I guess you could say, with our teacher effectiveness model. So there's a lot of good things about this.
Are there any tech prep dollars in this? Because at one time, computer science and computer areas were integrated into the tech prep area, where there was some dollars and cents.
Yes.
And I'm just curious as to that.
So this is-
Last year, in kind of preparation of this, last year, we added Management Information Systems, which is a new tech prep program.
Okay.
And so this kind of falls into that area, and so, yeah, we're working with that.
One of the things we saw with MIS is that we needed, in order to fulfill all the requirements of that CTE program, there's kind of a smattering of things that we needed. So what we saw was that it was kind of an extra bonus too, because the curriculum that as part of computer science principles aligns very well to covering some of those things that are required of the MIS. So MIS coupled with information management, a couple other courses, the programming courses, we actually fulfill all the requirements of that CTE program.
And we're actually having our local advisory committee meeting on Thursday with our luncheon, with our local people coming in from businesses. So yes, that is part of it. And we've been working on curriculum with Mr. Huff and meeting. So,
Okay, very
yeah,
good.
Definitely. Thank you.
Good.
Yes.
A couple of questions, but first a comment. I applaud what you're doing tremendously. It fits into the emphasis on math and science, and you started at the right place, but these are where the jobs are. So really, we owe it to our students to be able to prepare them for a great livelihood. So I can't more highly thank you. The U.S. is behind in math and science, as you know, and computer science is just a subset of that. So what you're doing is a really great preparation for our students. I really like that you checked with Lafayette College to get some kind of affirmation that you're on the right track. Is there anything that the local colleges or universities can do for advanced students that we have?
Well, in terms of, that's a good question, because actually we started the conversation with Lafayette University. Sorry, it's college. College? Lafayette.
It's a good
College.
upgrade. All the graduates will be happy with that.
Lafayette College. We actually started a conversation with them asking that very same question. So, and it's kind of sparked participation that maybe this is something that we can expand to other local colleges and universities, because they're looking to recruit.
Sure.
So they said, well, we look at you guys as you're like our farm team or your feeder program. So they need us, and it's something that one of the things that we talked about was having some of their students be mentors for some of the students in our advanced students. Having our advanced students, which actually I brought to. Having them be able to compete in programming competitions. We actually wanted to get some of the Lehigh Valley's best programming teams and have them compete against us at one of these colleges, universities. They would be willing to run it, set up all the programming problems that would be solved, and they would actually run those competitions. So anything that they can do, I told them that you're the next level. So anything that can give our students an authentic experience, an idea of where they are now versus where they need to be, is extremely positive for them.
I think you have a lot of mileage there. I can envision with your personality and what you're trying to do that a consortium in the Lehigh Valley that ties into even, I don't know, software companies in the Valley, but I would think that is what they want. They want to be able to grow the next generation, and I can see internships and other good things happening out of this.
We
So-
just met with Lafayette yesterday, with the
Right.
shortened day yesterday. We just met with them, and then today I received an email from Moravian, Professor from Moravian. So it's just starting.
Right. No, good.
The conversations are just starting.
I have to say, my son, Mason McIntyre, graduated in 2011, and he is a computer science major at Wilkes University, and they were his inspiration. He just flourished, and he actually was invited to come back and speak to his classes and actually did a presentation. So it's very relevant what we're doing, and I give
And
that.
one last question is, can you assure me that your students are not playing Assassin's Creed or Call of Duty during school?
Yeah, I assure you, we're not playing any. I don't know. We're building. Actually, I'll tell you the concept, because it's kind of a surprise, but you won't be around to see it. So, but we're gonna try to get some video. The idea was this: these two students. Why don't you guys explain? You guys.
So I've been working really hard the last couple weeks, almost a month now, on a game, and I don't know if you know, like you probably know it, Angry Birds. So we're gonna make in the festivities of the Thanksgiving game, we're gonna set up 3 big flat screen TVs at lunch, and there's gonna be a 2-player Angry Birds game where you're shooting into a middle, like with P-bird cats as the pigs, and the dogs are the birds, and we're hoping that'll get some morale and spark some interest in computer science.
What's kind of interesting is when you see it, it's very cartoony. So there's cannons on both sides. It's simple controls, but they made it so that there's cannons. They kind of go up and down. You stop them, and then you have to choose how much power they have. And when they shoot, they fire a bulldog. So you kind of have this bulldog flying through the air, and eventually it crashes on this structure that's like a P-Berg sort of high school. and there's little cats that are like wearing the Peaberg hats that you see in their logo. So it's kind of funny. There's a plane with a banner that flies by. It says like "Go Peaberg." If you hit the plane, it starts dropping dogs from the air. There's a sun that every time you fire a cannon, the sun gets really happy. If you miss, it gets mad. So it's kind of it's a really cool thing. And what was really interesting from a programming standpoint is they had to do it over 3 different computers. So they actually had to solve not only just making a game, but they had to make it so that it would sync up with all 3 at the same time. And I actually ended up having a conversation with some guys who worked on The Sims and Star Wars: The Old Republic. Like, these are major, major games. And they kind of gave them the advice that they would need to actually engineer this system to go and make them communicate together. So all the physics and everything came from some input from real professional game developers. So it was kind of it'll be a really neat thing. So hopefully we can find a way to get some type of video or something out for you guys to see.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
On D, I'll let you go.
Okay, thank you. Item D is the career cruising contract renewal. I included a blurb about that in your packet for Friday, and also the contract was attached then to board docs. Career cruising is the web-based career curriculum program that we use in our school district for students in grades 5 through 12. This allows students to do an interest inventory to determine what types of careers they should be looking at based on their interests. It allows them to research careers with up-to-date information. And it allows them to build an interactive portfolio that they can start when they're in the middle school and build upon as they go through our school system. So it maintains this portfolio for them as they grow. So this contract that I'm proposing this evening only takes us through the end of this school year. Our current contract ends in December of this year, so in an effort to just have things go school year, I'm recommending this contract go through the end of this school year, and then I'll bring about a new contract for the start of next school year. Because in working with the representative from Career Cruising, they're working on some new things as well now, where they're interfacing with Power School. So it allows some options for us to be able to explore that. And I have a training set up in the spring for us to explore that with our counselors and with their rep, to see if that's something that we would be interested in the future. So what I'm proposing this evening is only the contract renewal through the end of this school year, so we can maintain the program we currently have. Were there any questions about that?
Okay, and Plato?
Yes. The Plato contract, again, this is another contract that ends this December. So I'm recommending a renewal of this contract as well. Plato is our standards-based online program that we utilize right now primarily for our gifted education students. The really interesting thing about Plato, though, as we've met as a group, we've looked at all of the interventions and all of the programs that we're using across the district. And the one thing that Plato brings to the table that the others don't, that we're utilizing, is that this is a program that can be used to accelerate students, but also to remediate. And also then for students who are on level. So it's a very versatile program. Whereas many of the other programs we're using are solely intervention programs. So it's very versatile. What I'm recommending here this evening, though, is an increase in our licenses. So we were able to negotiate with the representative to increase our licenses by doubling our site licenses. So instead of having 30 licenses, we would have 60 in our secondary curriculum. And instead of having 10 in our K-8 library, we would have 20 at no additional cost to our district. So I think we really put our negotiation skills into play when we worked through this, and we were able to get a multi-year discount and a customer loyalty discount,
I brought up the fact that Plato has now been purchased by Edmentum. That's a company that has a number of different web-based programs. Study Island is one of their other programs. We use Study Island as well. So I kind of pushed him and said, you know, we use Study Island too. Can we get a discount on this for that? And he was able to put together, like I said, double the licenses for the same cost. By doubling those licenses, that will allow us to begin using Plato for our special education students as well as our gifted students. So we'll be able to use it for credit recovery and really explore other options that we would be able to use it for. Another really great thing about this contract or this system is that with those 60 site licenses, all that means is that we can use 60 at the same time. So it's not specific to 60 students, but it's specific to 60 at a time. So we can use it for many more students than 60, just as long as they aren't all using it at the same time. And with our gifted population currently, with the 30 licenses that we have, we've worked out a schedule where that never happens, where we're bumping kids off. So we've been able to really use the program to its fullest potential. This will allow us to even expand how we use it and at the same cost. Were there any questions about Plato or the contract?
I think in both cases, the only question ends up being, you mentioned about the areas that the funds would come out of.
Yes.
So in other words, there's money in those accounts for this that weren't allocated for anything else.
Correct.
In curriculum instruction budgets or areas that money was already allocated and just being used for this purpose, knowing that this contract was coming to a close.
Right.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steckel?
Thank you. Right. That kind of, Alyssa was talking, kind of walks us into a bit of a class size issue that seemed to be quite a concern this year. But as Dr. Moskaitis noticed and mentioned at a board meeting on the 29th of October, this has been a talk for decades. And when I think about what Alyssa was talking about with reference to Plato, and listening to you talk about Lafayette College, and we need to be creative in the ways that we can offer courses for students, and maybe it will help class size or impact on class size. When you mentioned that issue, and Ms. Matthews brought it up and said, you know, it would be nice that we could talk about it at our next meeting. So we got together and met with Mr. Reinhardt and said, oh my gosh, are we doing some doctoral dissertation, or, you know, who's going to get the credit for doing some of the research? No one's getting the credit. It just was an opportunity to do, and I don't credit me with this, but Mr. Reinhardt and others, it was a meta-analysis is the word that he brought up, and I thought, wow, meta-analysis, that's a big term. Bottom line is, we did some talking. I read a number of articles and just wanted to share just a piece about class size. And Dr. Moskaitis was absolutely correct. 3 decades this has been discussed. And, you know, there's no doubt. It has definitely created panic. It created panic in education. It's created panic in families. And really, when you look at the literature with reference to this, you're going to find both sides. You know, class size should be smaller, doesn't really matter, and you'll get lost in all of the data. But I want to share just a few themes that I thought were really critical. Class size matters, but teacher effectiveness matters more. That's why we have things like we did yesterday with in-service and professional development. That's so that we can train teachers to deal with students that we come in contact with today, to prepare them for things like the future. Class size reduction is expensive. It is. I mean, it's not a math person to figure that out. Smaller class sizes are important for certain sections of a school population, and I could see this in a number of pieces of research. Students with academic deficits, students with cultural disadvantages, students with IEPs, students with GIEPs. Another one that I thought was rather telling by reading all of this. As I read a lot of this research and I was just messing with it, something dawned on me, and this is a belief. This is nothing in research, but just follow this. Intervention groups. If you want to talk about class size, well, let's talk 1 to 5. That's extremely expensive, but let's just follow this thinking. Intervention groups taught by interventionists, 1 to 5 ratio, that equals increased face time, right? I have 5 students near me. I can touch 5 students pretty quickly. They're on their toes. I am getting feedback constantly from them. Well, that face time is going to equal what? Active participation. You're on your toes. I'm coming at you in a minute. I'm coming back to you, and I'm going to be doing this quickly. The more face time, if we increase the face time and active participation, that increases the opportunities to participate, which then equals immediate feedback to me, which also requires me to do redirection, remediation, which occurs, and actually, what do we want from all of this? This equals acceleration. It's just a silly math thing that I put together of this equals this equals this. So if you want to talk class size, we really have to go to a much smaller ratio than whether it's 1 to 29 or 1 to 25. And I'm not here to debate it, I'm just here to share a little piece of what I read recently. This is the other piece that I wanted to share. The argument on class size, it's not going to end in the near future. It's going to continue. As classrooms across the United States are going to be dealing with budget issues, there's no doubt about it. For us, the challenge is going to be to cope with bigger class sizes, whether by strengthening teacher training, and that's what you guys are doing, which is phenomenal. We're always looking at teacher training and other things that we can do, by introducing more technology or targeting smaller classes for those students that need it. When you make big blanket decisions, it sometimes is not as effective as looking at pockets. So what we're doing now is looking at enacting, and I did talk about this at the last board meeting. There's policy 206. I've already talked with central registration. And when they get students that are moving into our community in certain areas where class size is high, I'm taking a look at those and see if we can't place them in another school where class size is smaller. And that was just a piece on class size of some of the things that I've read more recently and some of the studies that have been written more recently. Any questions with reference to class size? And please understand, the debate could go on, and that's not what I'm here for. I'm just here to mention some of the things that I recently read with reference to Dr. Mosqueda's request.
I would like to thank you, Mr. Steckel, and the central administrative team for looking at this in an intellectually honest fashion. Speaks well to your integrity and your ability. This is a very difficult discussion, and the people who need to hear it are not in this room. They're probably not accessing this conversation. So I think this is something you really need to go out to the local PTA organizations and talk about it. Because to me, it is crazy to think that going from 25 to 26 students is mortgaging the future of those 26 students. Makes no sense to me. And what little that I did look at kind of supports that it's a mixed bag at best. If class size was a magic elixir that guaranteed our children's future, don't you think that everyone from a school board director, a superintendent on down, would make sure that that class size was maintained? But it's not. It's much more complicated than that. And so I would hate to see the school board do the politically convenient thing, which is lower class size. We've heard you. The dilemma is that if you went and polled the parents of students, as has been done by outside organizations, it is the #1 goal of parents to reduce class size. Why? Because there's a belief that that will lead to better student achievement. And if it's not there, if that link is not there, we have to look at that in an honest way. And it may mean that having a policy which has a set number is kind of irrelevant. Maybe it depends on the nature of the students that we're serving. the size of the classroom, which Mr. Reinhardt pointed out to me. The physical size of the classroom may dictate what's the max we can have. But it almost certainly is not just something simple that says that we must have 29 only. I will date myself considerably. I went to elementary school in the late 50s and early 60s in Maryland, not in this system. From grades 1 through 8, we had a class no smaller than 55. In my first grade class was 66 students with one teacher. Now, if you had said that today, they would say, you are a lunatic, this is impossible. And yet, in Prince George's County, Maryland, not a yuppie capital, economically and racially diverse, somehow students learned. I am not saying that we should go to 55 or 60 students per class. Remember when Dr. Finger also commented that her year in Japan uses 40 students per class, every class. If you don't want to hear that, you kind of ignore it. And you have PTA presidents stand up and say, clearly, everyone knows that lower class size. When you hear clearly, and everyone knows, go check it out yourself. I'm glad that you did, but I think it's just the start of the conversation. And it may be, even if you have that conversation, the public will still want lower class sizes. And I think if that's the case, then maybe there should be some estimation of what it will cost so that we can ensure, say, a class size of 25. Or, better yet, a class size of 20. And let the public decide, if necessary, in a referendum. It will cost a lot, but if that's what people want, then they should be given that opportunity. Thanks for looking at this in a, I think, a very honest way. Appreciate it.
Please know that what I share is not to incite anyone.
It will. It will.
It's just a piece of some reading that I wanted to share, and it's really it was in reference to a request that came from this board. I have to work with a number of people in the district tomorrow, and certainly don't want that to come out the wrong way. The part that I do, though, want to share is that it is something that will be debated, and it is certainly an issue. And please know, and I hope through the trust in the folks that work here, that we will be making decisions with reference to that, and certainly keeping children in mind. And if I may, one other issue that or one other item that was I did want to mention, based on I believe it was about a month ago that we were in here that we were talking about the SPP number, and Mr. Reinhardt did say that we would go back and take a look at that SPP number and see if we can extrapolate some data and kind of put it into text or in reference to what it would have looked like last year, the year before that. And when I looked at that, and Angie and I took a look at those numbers and thought, it's not mental math. It's not that difficult. Unfortunately, though, PVOS data is not archived, and we were unable to gather that data in order to extrapolate the data. So I apologize, but the PVOS data is not housed. We did get information from PDE that they will be doing that in the future, but currently it's not archived. So we couldn't go back and find those PVOS numbers from last year and the 2 years prior. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question of Mr. Steckel. Yeah, please. Mr. Steckel, you said class size matters, but teacher effectiveness matters more. Do we have a tool to measure teachers' effectiveness? And if not, is there one in development somewhere that we can use to help better fit class size to the teacher or the teacher to the class size?
Well,
So we optimize our what we have?
I think one of the things that we do, I don't know of the model. I know we have a teacher effectiveness model that currently evaluates teachers. Mm-hmm. And it is tied to scores and how well they do on 4 domains of education. But if, looking for like a quick fix to say, this one can handle more than that person.
Well, I would say a quick fix, but is there something that we can use to correlate which teacher can handle a
With
larger
reference to class
size?
size, I have never seen a correlation with, in something like that. I can say in doing that reading, that the teacher effectiveness matters more. It really was not in reference to, let's say, class size. It was just in reference to, it's more important that we make sure that teachers have the tools in order to effectively teach youth of today, more so than dealing with the class size issue. But we do have an effectiveness model, and the teachers we're using that to evaluate our staff.
Thank you.
Sure.
Long time ago, when I was in education, what we used to do is look at the numbers. And you would go through the student selection process, and you would come up with numbers, and you'd look at all your history teachers and basically do the division and say, well, they're going to have 26 kids. Our limit is 25. So then you go to the board and say, raise the numbers. And the board says, okay, we raise the numbers. We constantly did that. And I'm sure you'll remember
Yes,
that.
I do.
When we needed to raise the numbers, we just raised the numbers. Now we're at 29. And obviously, we're in a position where I would love to see lower class size. And again, we can argue that all we want, and we can debate that all we want. I would love to see that. But I also realize there's a tremendous expense to that. And when I look at that whole thing, I think we need to take a look at the policy and leave the professionals to evaluate that and break it down. And not use numbers, and just use your concepts of where kids are coming at, because you keep that daily. You know where kids are going. You have those numbers, because we're all administratively involved with those numbers, and make those decisions at that point in time. I don't know really if we need a policy to look at change all the time. I think we need to look at the policy and possibly rewrite it, and what is the best interest of the administrative team and how to act upon that. I think that's how you deal with class size. I don't think you just arbitrarily set something. One of the things I learned about class size was in testing. And we can debate this again all we want. But in testing, we used to give the PSSAs, and we used to give it in mass. And obviously, we didn't think that was very good, as a couple teachers trying to control several hundred kids. I don't think that's a great situation. And then we went to the point where we gave the other kids a half day off. And we tested the juniors and PSSAs, and we broke them down into maybe 20 a class with 4 teachers, giving those kids the opportunity to have the best testing environment available. Now, in some cases, we know the skill sets weren't there to do a lot of the math components, because I can motivate a student, but if he doesn't have the skills, they're going to have problems doing. But we tried to make the environment as perfect as possible, and that became, obviously, the least restrictive environment, so to speak, because the numbers were low and the teaching staff was obviously high. Again, interaction, participation, those things. But again, at the expense, I think we need to revisit the policy and take a look at numbers and let it up to the administration, and I think that's what works best.
If I could just offer a few final comments. I passed out to the board, and I have available for anyone from the press if they're interested, a section of a report, a survey that was done by PASA, which is the Pennsylvania Association of School Administrators, and PASBO, which is the School Boards Association. Each year they survey districts regarding what what they've been intending to do to financially make it through the year. And the second item on there says 47% of the school districts in Pennsylvania expect to increase class size in 2013-14. That's on top of larger class sizes imposed by 51% of school districts in 2012-13 and 70% of school districts in 11-12. So you can see that there is across the Commonwealth a trend to increase class sizes based on financial restrictions that districts are facing. also on that page are some other ways that districts are attempting to cope with these tough financial times. So I just thought I'd share that with you. The other thing is every time that, well, I shouldn't say this. Most of the time, if you want a meta-analysis of anything on the internet, you have to pay for it. You have to pay $35 and they'll give you the meta-analysis. So I'm not finding that you can find too many out there that you don't have to pay for. And I wasn't about to pay for these things. But I gave you one example, and on the top that was free. The other one is a synthesis of research on the effects of class size, and that was from Educational Leadership. And they're just worth looking at and thinking about because, again, they'll reinforce everything that we've said thus far. The other thing, and I'll end the conversation there, is that running elementary schools years ago, we had higher class sizes in the 80s. But one of the things that we did that offset that was we grouped kids by ability for certain subjects. So then you could apply the theory that, well, stronger, more capable learners could be grouped in a higher group for reading and science and social studies. So you didn't feel as bad about 35 in a room or in a group for kids who were strong students. And then that allowed you then to whittle down the kids who needed the strong and able assistance of an adult to about 15 in those classes where kids were struggling. Now, you know, that at the time certainly made a lot of sense to all of us, but research, again, that's been taken over the course of time has shown that that was gave those at the smaller and the kids who needed more intense help, it didn't really prove to be effective over the course of time. So we could compensate for larger classes that way years ago, where now you can't group by ability like that. And so that means individual teachers have a stretch in their classroom of gifted to kids who are really struggling with basic reading and math skills. And so that span of abilities is really tremendously challenging, the more kids you have in the room. So anyway, but thank you for the opportunity to discuss it.
Okay, thank you. Public? Anybody from the public to be heard on academic agenda items? Anyone? Yes, sir.
I am John Kennedy. I spoke a couple of times before. I want to applaud the effort of the computer science people at the high school for making these changes. And also the effort in a kind of moderate way to bring in some of the wider student body into the excitement of computer science. That little turtle that you spoke of, that of course was the front turtle or front man for the logo language, which is actually a complete programming language where someone could learn to be a computer science by learning that language in itself. And of course, there is a descendant of that language called Scratch, which I imagine you're somewhat familiar with. You teach Scratch. Where, in what context, what course?
We do it in our visual basics.
Okay. Okay, I was going to be so bold as to make a suggestion. I believe you have an apps course where everybody takes word processing and maybe Excel, I don't know. It's going to be so bold that you look at splitting that into two parts and do half programming and half apps, and actually, because my question is where is the programming for the rest of us? That's a question I had. And I was a little amused by Plato. I was at the University of Illinois at the time Plato was developed. I actually did tours occasionally of the development lab. There was a group of Australians there, and they came by and they said, I came by and I was giving them a tour, and I said, "Would you like to see Plato?" And the Australian said, "Well, mate, yeah, I'd like to, but I think he died a few hundred years ago." But my wife actually was employed by the Plato Development Lab and helped develop some of the early programs. I know it's gone on through many iterations since then, but she was there. She used to get money, what do they call it? Since she worked on the early programs, I used to send her a check about every 6 months. But they finally bought her out, so we don't get any part of that anymore. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? So on a summary update, we would vote on computer science curriculum changes at Eastern Area High School at our board meeting. We would also vote on the career cruising contract renewal from January to the end of the school year, as well as then Plato contract renewal. And that should be it. Questions? Comments, criticisms, statements, or otherwise? If not, so be it. Let's go to policy.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
What's that? You on the floor? I do. I tend to.
Sure.
We'll wait 1 second.
Yeah, we'll sign. It's for Geiger. He knows my handwriting. Yes, he knows. Tell Geiger. Good job. Okay.
Good job.
Make sure, tell him to get it. That's a quote.
Good job. Can't believe they're wearing Bermuda
I guess we can
shorts.
begin now. You have the floor. Thank you. I'm bringing policy 233 back. That was a policy that I had presented in October. There was a request for an addition of language regarding in-school suspensions. So on page 4 of that policy, I've inserted just a statement regarding in-school suspension, stating that it is to provide a structured and supervised learning environment for students who demonstrate violations of the established school procedures and regulations. We would be assigning in-school suspension as a result of a violation of our code of conduct. And that while assigned to the in-school suspension room, that students are expected to adhere to established rules. I've also just outlined or delineated that the procedure outlined earlier in the policy regarding informal hearings would be applicable to in-school suspension as well. So I've added that in at the request of the board, but I did not change any of what I had presented in October. So it's the same otherwise. Are there any questions regarding that? In addition?
I think.
Okay, so we can move that forward then. And then you have, your next policy is 904. Yes, policy 904 is the public attendance at school events. The language in this policy is, there was one small change made, and it's just to clarify that the board would prohibit gambling possession and use of controlled substances, alcoholic beverage, and weapons on school premises, in any district buildings, or on any grounds owned, operated, or leased by the district. So that's just to expound upon the current policy and add in that language.
Any concerns or questions regarding that? Seth? So we will move that forward for its acceptance. And then there's the pending 810.1 drug and alcohol use.
That's actually Mr. Castrovinci.
We had this,
Yeah,
had to step out to take care of a phone call.
okay, all right. Do you want to move forward and we can come back to that, or how do you want to handle that?
Is that necessary, John, for this one?
I think it probably is to our benefit to have that move on. Maybe what we could do until he returns is just proceed, and then we'll come back to it.
Right.
How would that be? Okay?
Fine.
All right. I think we should try to keep it moving, the policy moving.
Okay, so at this point, are there any comments from the public regarding the policies that we
What-
have?
Point of order. I'd like to make a motion that we recess the policy committee until Mr.
Castrovinci?
Castrovinci comes back and move on to finance.
It's fine.
Okay.
We don't need a second, we can just operate on that. Therefore, Mr. Simonetta.
Okay, thank you. Let me just switch around we got a change order for our project at Paxinosa on the waterproofing, in the amount of $48,500. I have Mr. Grice here from BOE Engineering to give explicit detail on the need and the reason. But basically, as you're getting into a project, it's a $2 million project, and you're fixing leaks and trying to waterproof the building throughout with all the masonry and the roofing. It's not until you get into the project till you sometimes have to do more than what the original scope was. In this case, they found some areas as they got into what they had planned to do that needed to go further. And Josh, if you could explain a little more on exactly what they're going to do for the 48,000.
Sure, I'd be happy if you could just give me 2 minutes, we can go just through some photos that would help illustrate
Sure.
the problem.
By the way, this 48,000, it's the only change order for this project, and it's well within the contingency amounts that were set aside for it.
Thanks. We'll just bring up a couple photos. I just wanted to kind of put into context, I'll give you a refresher what the project was for. Again, Paxinosa Elementary was constructed in 1924, so it's a 90-year-old facility at this point. The masonry facade was to the point where it needed pretty extensive renovation and corrections. This is just a kind of an overall before photo, just to kind of give you an idea. The reddish areas, of course, are brick. There's also some ornate cast stone concrete work throughout the building. So joints between the brick and the cast stone and other features around the building were deteriorating. The flashings were in very poor condition or non-existent. So the scope of the project really was to take care of the envelope of the building, the exterior masonry, and the parapets which extend above the roof elevation. So again, these are just a couple before photos, closer ups of some of the cast stone features. You can see a lot of cracking, a lot of water had gotten into the units, had frozen, spalled, and created a lot of the issues that we are just about done correcting at this point. And just some other photos. These are some window surrounds. Window replacement was included with the project as well. So as Mr. Simonetta had indicated, we were able to do some preliminary investigations and determination of an overall scope that was included in the bid. Some of the things, again, until we got into the actual demolition and reconstruction, the total scope just was not able to be determined. So we did establish unit prices for a scope of work, brick repointing, brick replacement, cast stone replacement, plaster repair, because we knew inside the building, we were going to encounter some pretty ugly plaster conditions, which is one of the items on the change order. So the two top photos are conditions that, we ran into that were there present, before we started, and the bottom picture, it might be tough to see, but that's a basically reconstructed plaster wall at the exterior of a classroom. The parapets that I referred to earlier, again, those are brick and cast stone features that extend up above the roof elevation. The top two photos, you can see the extent of demolition and reconstruction that was necessary to correct the flashing. So as the roof membrane, the roof system interacted or interfaced with the parapet, again, the condition throughout the entire building could not be determined until we were in the stage of actually reconstructing those walls. So the other portion of the change order was for additional roof replacement and roof modifications that were necessary, and that was uncovered as the work was taking place. So again, $2 million+ project. We've been very, very pleased with the workmanship. We had an excellent contractor. Things were very smooth as far as the operations within the building. We're very pleased with how the final product will turn out. So I'll just wrap up with that, I guess.
So Josh, this is work that they have done or have not completed yet?
They have not completed the roofing. Wanted to bring this for formal approval, but it is rather urgent that we can keep them moving to get it completely buttoned up again. A lot of the plaster repair has been completed simply because it was within occupied spaces of the building that we wanted to get done before the students were back.
So they just had discovered this in the last month or two, month and a half?
Some of the conditions they had, other conditions were later in the summer, but until we had a final dollar amount, I didn't want to keep bringing you, a few change orders. I just wanted to come with one and wrap up the project.
Personally, I and you know this, I do appreciate individual ones.
Okay.
Because that way we have an idea where we're heading and when we're heading there. Because sometimes you get to the end and you'll know from history, you end up getting a no vote and then somebody has to figure out who's eating up the cost. Another
Just a quick question, Josh. The 48,500, is that of what total contingency?
Mr. Simonetto would have to verify what, over and above the contract amount, had been set aside for contingency.
We set aside 5% for the contingency.
Okay, so this is at about 2.1%.
Do you see,
I can verify that.
do you see anything else occurring, or is this really the end of it?
No, they are all but complete with the scope of work, so this will be the end of it, yes.
I don't think this is shocking at all due to the fact that anybody, when we first turned over the board that was up on that roof and walked in that area and looking at the concrete, looking at what had deteriorated, I think this isn't bad at all, based on the scope of the problems that the building endured. I mean, it was a mess. So to get that and then to go back with us with something that I think, in scope of $2 million at 48,000, is extremely reasonable. I think we obviously move forward on this.
Yeah, I wanted to keep it short for the discussion tonight, but
Understand.
we'd be very happy to take you through the building, walk you through. I could do a much more extensive photo update at some point as well.
Good. I think that would be appreciated when you consider the monies that were spent.
Do you mind if I take advantage of this opportunity since you're standing right here in
Sure.
front of me? When you go to the building, the next time, would you take, and you're standing in front of the building and you're looking at it, would you take a walk over on the far left along the property edge? The last time I was down there, it looked like scrappy stuff laying around.
Is this further out to Northampton Street?
If you're
or-
standing in the front of the, looking at the building, and if you go over to the left along the property line,
Uh-huh.
if you could tell, there are blue tarps and other kinds of things. If you could just check and see if they're still there, and if they are, if you could have all that stuff really all around the property removed, because I'm afraid, it could end up where we don't want it. It just shouldn't be there, especially now with possibility of snow and everything else.
Okay, sure.
You don't mind? Would you do that?
Yes, I will.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
actually, we can save Josh a trip to take care of that first in the morning.
Whatever. Yeah, good. Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if it was, it didn't look like it was material that was needed, but then again, I don't know that, so, yeah, so, all right.
Okay. Josh, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to return back to policy. Mr. Castrovinci, you're going to be up with Carrie.
Right. Yeah, Mr. Reinhardt and I talked about policy 810-1, and given the fact that we have 4 new board members coming on, we're going to wait until those people do come on and bring this, so we're not in the midst of transition.
So you're going to leave it pending at this point?
Yes.
Okay.
We did have that conversation. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Castrovinci, for reminding me that we did have that conversation.
I'm sorry.
We did.
I stepped out to conduct business we talked about earlier.
You can't leave the room anymore. You have to stay inside the room.
I actually need to make another phone call to prepare for it.
Yeah,
Can I step out real
that's,
quick?
yes. But he's right. We did have that conversation. Oh, boy.
You want to retract your motion, Mr. Riley?
Are there any questions regarding, or comments regarding policies from the public? If not, we'll move forward to some matter.
Carrie, so we're going to be putting on the
I'm
agenda.
sorry, I thought we already went through the rest of it. We're putting on the agenda the policies for 233, 904, with the changes, and pending will be 810.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem. Thank you. And back to Michael.
Okay, I will use Dr. Muskaitis' term, not an endearing term for us, but obviously, I think we all know where we were headed, what we're up against for this year, and the term Groundhog Day is the first that comes into mind. What we're gonna do tonight is just go through, and we've talked about this from last year, and we talked about it probably every meeting since, talking about a estimate $5 million deficit beginning for the 14-15 budget cycle. So what we did was we prepared a draft first run of the budget with estimated revenues and certain assumptions throughout. And the assumptions that we're building off of currently are no change in state and federal revenue, no change in other budgets listed there, no change in staffing. Now, the tax impact came in, the base index for next year statewide is 2.1%. The adjusted index for Easton is 2.7%. So what the numbers in front of you tonight will be going to index and estimating on 2.7%. That in no way indicates that anyone is recommending or not recommending going that far, but that's what these numbers are based on. We just received today from the county the information on the assessed valuation, but these numbers here are right now at the current assessments, no change. That'll be updated in the next presentation. It also assumes that we're going to maintain a current fund balance appropriation, and for the 13-14 school year, the board approved appropriating $750,000. So that number is still in the numbers you will see tonight. And the expenditure area of the budget, of the proposed budget for next year, is really only addressing increases in contractual obligations and associated benefits, and minor increases in utilities and other insurances.
Do you have that contractual obligations and the associated benefits, do you have that broken down into dollars and cents?
I do have a number, total district-wide, and we are breaking it down. You'll have a more detailed by category at the next presentation.
Okay, thank you.
So what we're doing is the budget summary, and we're looking at the three-year cycle. In 12-13, it was $132,265,000. For the 13-14 current budget, we approved it at $134,313. Now, if you recall, last year at this time, we were probably about $4 or $5 million above that. We had to do some reductions and other adjustments to get down to that $134,313. Next year, based on what I indicated, which was just the contractual obligations and associated benefits, we're looking at a budget of $141 million. With the 2.7% increase in taxes, $750,000 appropriated from fund balance, our revenues will shoot up to a little over $136 million, thus leaving us almost $5 million as a shortfall, starting the cycle, moving into this budget cycle. The tax impact or status is for the three categories that, for the last couple of years, we've addressed. We've addressed at the beginning stages and throughout the budget process, 0%, the base index, and then the adjusted index. And they are the categories that I mentioned. So if we go down to the base index, again, just for clarification, all these numbers still assume $750,000 from fund balance. If we go to the base index of 2.1, the deficit increases to almost $5.4 million. At 0, that jumps up to almost $6.7 million deficit. And district-wide, Mr. Ryder, addressing your question there, the increases for contractual salaries alone, now the total budget is increasing about $6.7 million. These three areas address or account for $6.4 million of that. 2.7 in just contractual salaries. Pension obligations. Pension obligations rise from 17% board share this year to 22% for next year. So just that 5% increase in the pension obligations on the total district salary is an increase of $3.2 million. And net of concessions that were made through negotiations, we're still looking at a modest increase in medical benefits of $500,000. As I said, 6.4 million of the $6.7 million estimated increase right now are just in those three areas. And just as an aside, even at a 2.7% tax increase, you're generating, and again, on a 96% collections rate, you're generating a little over $2 million. That's it. So that doesn't cover salaries, doesn't cover pension, doesn't cover anything that was driving the increase. Our fund balance, we have committed for this year, which were our prior year expenditures, and the $750 that we budgeted for of 1.7. We have an assigned fund balance, which are those areas that we can use for medical benefits, pension obligations, other capital projects of 11.7. And then we have the unassigned of $2.7 million. We also, if you recall, on the capital reserve, we have $4.4 million in capital reserve that we will be cutting into with some of the security things once that's finally approved. And of course, we have our capital project budgets, the borrowed money of nearly $16 million left in that. So the timelines that we're up against right now, and obviously it's November, and it's time to really kick this into gear. We will continue our cabinet meetings with internal department and building budget meetings. January 30th is the deadline to adopt the tax resolution. Adopting the tax resolution indicating that we will not go over index, or adopting a preliminary budget if the board chooses to use exceptions or referendum going over index. And if we do, if the board does approve to go over index, whether through referendum or through exceptions, we have to adopt the preliminary budget by February 19th. And then we would submit the referendum exceptions by March 6th. May 31st is the statewide deadline to adopt the preliminary budget. We have, in the last couple of years, targeted that day for our April board meeting for the preliminary budget. June 10th, we have to make the final budget available, and June 30th, well, that would also be changed if we approve the preliminary budget in April. That would move up to May, but guidelines are June 30th to adopt the final budget. We have typically done that the last couple of years in our May meeting. So I don't think this is any news to anyone, but we'll open it up to questions, and obviously more detail will be coming.
Questions, comments?
Comment and question. On slide 2, under assumptions, bullet number 2, no change in other budgets. You have the public library included in that?
Well, yeah, that was in the slide. That is separated out. That is,
Because the district is supposed to be a pass-through, it shouldn't affect our budget numbers at all. The amount we collect and pass through the district to the library.
and we did have these conversations at the end of the cycle last year. In the past, even though we are just the taxing authority for the library and for the community college. Community college has always come in, whatever it was, that was the number. The tax rates that have been set aside and separated in the tax bill have not been on target. And we've talked with the director of the library, and also the budget amounts, what they're looking for tax dollars, not all things were included in that in the past. Quick example, $1 million for salaries, and then we want $1 million for the taxes. But you have to include in there workers' comp costs, medical benefits, pension. And in some areas, the total numbers for that were not included. So even though that's in there, we're assuming that that's just going to be a lock, and whatever we're going to break out in complete detail, that the tax rates will be adjusted accordingly. Whatever the library and the community college need or they're requesting, that will be separated out into 3 tax rates.
And it won't go against our cap?
It will not go. I've already started working with the state. I actually want to take those 2 budgets out of our general fund and make it a separate fund out of our cap and everything else. So this way.
Isn't there a code in there in the 900s or something for pass-through organizations?
Yes, but that would still be considered in the general fund. I'd like to make it, for
Okay.
example, our cafeteria account, that's Fund 25. It's not part of our general operating budget, unless we buy equipment, for the cafeteria. I'd like to separate that out, so it's a clear accounting of exactly what's requested, what's spent, and it all matches up to the tax rate. And I started working with the state on that.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I know it's early, Mike, but do you have any initial ideas of how you're going to find the $5 million?
Well, we hired Mr. Reinhardt for it. No, no, it's going to be much of the same. I will tell you that the cabinet, we have already had many conversations, and the ideas have been flowing. Obviously, it's not something we can go in and cut pencils and crayons. There's going to be different ways of looking at programs. Obviously, I can't say that there will not be staff reductions. That's a large amount that all areas will need to be looked at. Scheduling, offerings. I mean, it's going to be just the gamut. And not that there's good news, but a lot of ideas have already been circulating, through the cabinet, and we're ready to move forward and start addressing those. And that information will be delineated, presented, and discussed in quite a lot of detail. as we move through this process.
What's the date on announcing retirements, John?
Not sure what you mean. You mean, do you want health benefits or
Yeah,
you can
I
retire
mean-
whenever?
Yeah, but I mean, to the district, if,
In the teacher contract, if you qualify for the HRA retirement benefit, you need to let us know by December 31st.
so December
I
31st.
would guess that probably most, if not all, of those names are in because I always meet with people in the fall, and make them aware that they're eligible for it, and there really aren't many eligible
Okay. Okay.
administrators. Yep, administrators as well.
Okay, thank you.
It's quite obvious that with the deficit that we're facing, that two areas that will come under a lot of scrutiny will once again be positions, staff, and programs, and programmatic changes, alterations, deletions. But we're also looking at different ways to do business. And so, you know, as Mike said, there's been some creative ideas tossed around that might help us out with all of this. But for anyone to think that we won't be losing staff members or some programs with that kind of a deficit really is not looking at the fiscal reality of this. And that's why the conversation about class size is so important and so urgent, if you will, because we may not be in a position to impact on what we really want for class sizes once we see how many positions and how many programs we're going to have to eliminate.
Just quickly looking at something, January 14th and January 28th are really the two key dates, because on the 14th is when basically final presentation has to happen and discussion and everything, and on the 28th, the actual vote has to be taken or decision made of if we're looking at referendum or not referendum, or if we're looking to exceed the cap or anything. So those are, two critical dates in the path. Other questions, comments?
Mr. Semineta, do you have a average cost increase per taxpayer or property owner if the?
You know, I don't, on this slide, I don't have that. And actually, at the next presentation, with the new assessment, and I think at this point, without the new assessments coming out, even though I put these numbers out just for a first look, I'd rather not put it up here and then come back down. Because obviously, the assessments have increased each year, so it'll help that a little bit.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, and that's all we have on finance. I'll open it up to the floor for anybody in the public that would like to address the board on anything in the finance area. I'm seeing no hands. That concludes that. The only thing moving on for a vote next week will be the change order number 1 on Paxton-Osa Elementary. At this point, the last piece on our agenda this evening, if there's any comments by the public on any non-agenda items. Anything on non-agenda? Again, seeing no hands or anything, I will move that we adjourn. We are concluded for this evening. Thank you. Executive session afterwards.